Hello everyone. Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment with where you're from and what time you're watching. That way, YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. Now, let's begin. The interstate stretched endlessly ahead of us that October afternoon in 2018. Nothing but cornfields and the occasional barn breaking up the monotony of rural Nebraska. I was driving our minivan with my wife Claire beside me. Our two kids, Lucas, who was 14, and Sophia, who just turned 11, plugged into their devices in the back. We were heading from Chicago to visit Claire's parents in Denver, a trip we'd made dozens of times before. But this time we decided to take the scenic route through some smaller highways instead of sticking to I-80 the whole way. My job as an IT consultant had been particularly brutal that year, and Claire thought the extra couple hours would give us time to decompress, maybe see something besides concrete barriers and semi-trucks. The kids complained at first, but once we promised them they could pick the music and we'd stop at whatever weird roadside attractions they wanted, they came around to the idea. Around 4 in the afternoon, the gas light came on just as we were passing through this town called Millbrook, population 847, according to the faded green sign. The place looked like it had been frozen in 1975 and left to slowly decay. A main street with more boarded-up windows than open businesses, a water tower with rust streaks painting abstract patterns down its sides, and that particular kind of silence that makes you automatically lower your voice. The only gas station was an old Phillips 66 with analog pumps that probably hadn't been upgraded since the Clinton administration. While I filled up the tank, Claire took the kids inside to use the restroom and grab some snacks. The attendant, this rail-thin guy with yellowed fingernails and a John Deere cap pulled low, watched us the entire time without saying a word, just stood there behind the register following our every movement with these pale, watery eyes that never seemed to blink. We got back on the road around 4:30, and I remember Claire making some joke about how that guy probably hadn't seen that many customers all week. The kids were already arguing about whose turn it was to pick the next song when I noticed the pickup truck. It was maybe 3 car lengths behind us, a beat-up Ford F-150, probably early 2000s model, that muddy brown color that could either be the original paint or just years of dirt. At first, I didn't think anything of it. Small town, only one main road heading out. Made sense someone else would be going the same direction. But after about 10 miles, when I took the turnoff for State Route 38, instead of continuing straight toward the interstate, the truck took the same turn. Claire was reading something on her phone. The kids were zoned out again, and I kept checking the rearview mirror, telling myself I was being paranoid. 20 minutes passed, then 30, and the truck maintained that exact same distance behind us, never getting closer, never falling back. I tested it by speeding up to about 75. The truck sped up. I dropped down to 55. The truck slowed down. Even when I changed lanes unnecessarily or took my foot off the gas to coast for a bit, that Ford stayed right there in perfect formation, like we were connected by an invisible rope. The sun was starting to set, painting everything in this sick orange glow, and I finally nudged Claire and quietly told her to look behind us without being obvious about it. She twisted around, pretending to check on the kids, then turned back to me with this expression I'd never seen on her face before. Not quite fear yet, but that sharp alertness you get when your brain realizes something's wrong before you can fully process what it is. The road we were on was getting progressively more isolated. Hadn't seen another car for at least 15 minutes, and the farmhouses were becoming fewer and farther between. Claire pulled out her phone to check GPS for the nearest town, maybe find a restaurant or somewhere public we could stop, but we were in a dead zone with no signal. That's when the truck made its first aggressive move. Without warning, it surged forward and got right up on our bumper, maybe 2 feet away, and hit us with the high beams. The inside of our van lit up like a stadium, and Lucas actually yelped from the back seat, asking what was happening. I could see the truck's grill filling up my entire rearview mirror, this massive wall of rusted metal and blinding white light. My heart was hammering as I pressed the accelerator, pushing our speed up to 80, then 85, way faster than I'd normally drive with my family in the car, especially on these narrow country roads with no shoulder and drainage ditches on both sides. The truck backed off for maybe 30 seconds, just long enough for me to think maybe it was over. Maybe they'd just been messing with us and were done now. But then it came roaring back, engine growling like some rabid animal. And this time when it got close, I heard a tap. Metal on metal, just a light bump against our rear bumper. Sophia started crying, and Claire was gripping the door handle so hard her knuckles were white, telling me in this forced calm voice to just keep driving. Don't stop. We'll find help soon. But I knew she was doing the same math I was. We had maybe a quarter tank of gas left, no cell service, didn't know where the next town was, and it was getting darker by the minute. The trees on either side of the road were starting to look like walls closing in, and every shadow could have been another vehicle waiting to box us in. Then I saw something that made my whole body go rigid. About a half-mile ahead, there was another vehicle pulled off on the side of the road with its hazard lights on. As we got closer, I could make out that it was another pickup truck, dark blue or black, and there was someone standing beside it. The moment we passed, I watched in the side mirror as the person got back in their truck and the hazards went off. Within seconds, that second truck pulled onto the road behind the brown Ford, and now we had two vehicles tailing us in perfect synchronization. Claire saw it too, and immediately started rifling through the glove compartment for anything we could use as a weapon. Found nothing but insurance papers and an ice scraper. I pushed our speed up to 90, praying we wouldn't hit a deer or blow a tire, while Lucas kept asking if we should call 911, not understanding that our phones were just expensive bricks out here in the middle of nowhere. The two trucks started taking turns, rushing up behind us. First, the brown one would surge forward with its high beams, then fall back while the dark one took its place, like they were playing some sick game of tag with our van as the prize. At one point, the dark truck pulled into the oncoming lane and started creeping up alongside us, and I could see the driver through his window. Heavy-set guy with a thick beard, wearing a baseball cap, just staring straight at us with this blank expression like we were nothing more than deer he was hunting. Claire screamed at the kids to get down on the floor, and I jerked the wheel to the right, forcing him to either hit us or fall back. He chose to fall back, but not before I heard him lay on his horn for a solid 10 seconds, the sound echoing through the empty farmland like some kind of war cry. Just when I thought we were completely screwed, I spotted a sign. Rushmore, 5 miles. I had no idea what Rushmore was, but 5 miles meant buildings, people, maybe a police station or at least somewhere public where these psychos might back off. The speedometer was hovering around 95 now, our old minivan shaking like it might come apart at the seams, and I could smell the brakes starting to burn from the constant speed changes. Behind us, the two trucks had given up their alternating pattern and were now riding side by side, taking up the entire width of the road, their combined headlights turning the interior of our van into a blinding white box. Lucas was curled up on the floor behind my seat, and I could hear him whispering something over and over. Took me a second to realize he was saying the license plate number of the brown truck, trying to memorize it in case we needed it later. Those 5 miles felt like 50. Every curve in the road, I was sure we were going to flip. Every straight stretch, the trucks would surge forward again, getting close enough that I could hear their engines roaring over ours. Finally, I saw lights ahead. A cluster of buildings, a Dairy Queen sign glowing like a beacon of salvation, and best of all, a lit-up Texaco station. I yanked the wheel hard to the right without signaling, tires screaming as we skidded into the gas station lot. There were people there, a family at the pumps, a couple of teenagers hanging out by the door, witnesses. The two trucks slowed down as they passed, and for a moment I thought they were going to follow us in. But they kept going, disappearing into the darkness heading west, though not before the passenger in the brown truck made a gun gesture with his hand pointed right at us through the window. We sat in that Texaco parking lot for 20 minutes, all of us shaking before Claire managed to get enough signal to call 911. The dispatcher took our information and said she'd send a patrol car to check the area. but I could tell from her tone that without proof of actual assault or damage to our vehicle beyond that tiny bumper tap, there wasn't much they could do. While we waited, I went inside and asked the clerk, this kid who couldn't have been older than 19, if he knew anything about two trucks that might hang around the area hassling travelers. The way his face changed told me everything. He knew exactly who I was talking about. He said locals called them the highway hunters, a couple of guys from the area who'd been doing this for years, picking out-of-state plates coming through from Millbrook and running them until they either crashed, ran out of gas, or made it to town. Nobody could prove anything, and they were careful never to do real damage, just terrorize people for fun. The state trooper who showed up an hour later, Officer Reeves, took our statement but basically confirmed what the clerk had said. Without dash cam footage or significant vehicle damage, it was our word against theirs, and even the license plate Lucas had memorized led to a truck that had been reported stolen 3 years ago. Reeves offered to escort us to the nearest motel, said we should stay the night and continue in daylight, maybe take a different route. We did exactly that, barely slept, and left at dawn, taking the interstate the whole way to Denver. Never heard anything more about it from the police, but I did some research when we got home. Found 3 other similar accounts online from people who'd stopped in Millbrook, all within the past 2 years, all describing the same brown pickup and the same coordinated harassment. We never took that route again, obviously, and to this day, whenever I see a pickup truck in my rearview mirror holding steady for more than a few miles, I can feel my pulse quicken and my grip tighten on the wheel. The weekend in Sedona had been exactly what I needed after months of overtime at the hospital. I'm a pediatric nurse in Phoenix, and between the long shifts and constant emotional drain of working with sick kids, I desperately needed those 2 days of hiking and disconnecting from everything. It was late Sunday afternoon when I started the drive back, maybe around 4:30, and I remember thinking I'd beat the traffic if I took Highway 87 instead of the interstate. That decision still haunts me. My old Subaru Outback had been making this weird rattling sound for weeks, but I kept putting off taking it to the mechanic because, honestly, when do I have time? The AC was blasting, some true crime podcast was playing through the speakers, and I was feeling pretty good about life, planning what I'd meal prep for the week ahead. The engine died without warning about 40 miles north of Payson, right where the highway cuts through absolutely nothing but desert and scattered juniper trees. No dramatic sputtering, no warning lights beforehand, just sudden, complete silence, except for the sound of my tires rolling to a stop on the shoulder. I tried the ignition maybe 20 times, each turn producing nothing but a pathetic clicking sound. My phone showed no service in the corner, which wasn't surprising given the area, but seeing those words made my chest tighten in a way I hadn't expected. The sun was already starting to dip toward the horizon, painting everything in that harsh orange light that makes the desert look beautiful and hostile at the same time. I popped the hood even though I had no idea what I was looking for, steam, smoke, anything obvious, but everything looked normal to my untrained eye. The highway stretched empty in both directions, heat still radiating off the asphalt in wavy lines that made the distance look liquid and uncertain. For about 20 minutes, nobody passed. Not a single vehicle. I kept checking my phone, walking in small circles around the car trying to catch even one bar of signal. But nothing. Then I saw it. A white van approaching from the south, one of those older models with no windows in the back, like contractors use. Relief washed through me as I stepped toward the road and waved both arms above my head. The van slowed down and pulled over about 30 feet ahead of my car. 2 men got out, and immediately something in my gut clenched. The driver was probably in his 50s, thin but wiry, wearing a faded Diamondbacks cap and jeans that looked like they hadn't been washed in weeks. The passenger was younger, maybe early 30s, heavy-set with a patchy beard and this weird nervous energy that made him keep shifting his weight from foot to foot. They both had on these matching Navy work shirts with no company logo, which struck me as odd. The older one smiled, but it was all teeth and no warmth, like someone who'd learned to smile from a manual. "Car trouble?" the older one called out, already walking toward me. His voice had this raspy quality, like a long-time smoker, and he kept his right hand in his pocket the entire time he approached. The younger one hung back by their van, but he was watching me with this intense focus that made me want to step back toward my car. "Yeah, it just died on me," I said, trying to keep my voice steady and normal. "I already called DA, they should be here soon." The lie came out automatically, some primitive part of my brain already in protection mode. The older man's smile got wider, and he glanced back at his companion, who let out this short, harsh laugh. "That's funny," he said, pulling out his own phone and waving it at me, "because there's no signal for miles out here. We drive this route all the time for work. Nearest tower's back in Payson." My mouth went dry. He was right, and we all knew it. The younger one finally spoke up, his voice higher than I expected. "We can give you a ride to Pine. There's a gas station there with a phone." The way he said it, the way they both stood there waiting for my answer, felt like a trap closing around me. "That's really kind of you," I managed, taking a small step backward toward my Subaru. "But my boyfriend is actually on his way. He left Phoenix about an hour ago, should be here any minute." Another lie, but I tried to sell it by glancing down the road like I was expecting someone. The older man's expression didn't change, but he tilted his head slightly like a dog hearing a strange sound. "Phoenix is 2 hours away," he said slowly, as if explaining something to a child. "If he left an hour ago, you're still looking at another hour minimum. Gets dark quick out here. Not safe for a woman alone." The younger one had started moving, not toward me but in this casual arc that would put him between me and my car if he kept going. I noticed he was carrying something in his right hand now. Couldn't tell what it was, maybe keys or a tool, but the way he held it made my breathing go shallow. Every instinct I had from years of living in the city, from those self-defense classes I took in college, was screaming at me to get away from these men. "Really, I'm fine waiting," I said, louder this time, hoping maybe another car would appear and break this horrible moment. But the road remained empty, and the silence that followed my words seemed to stretch forever. The older man finally shrugged, but instead of walking back to their van, he moved closer to my car, peering through the driver's side window like he was checking something. "Subaru," he said to his friend, not to me. "Probably the alternator. We got tools in the van, could take a look." The younger one grinned at this, and it was such an inappropriate response to the offer that my whole body went cold despite the desert heat. "No, thank you, really. Please just go," I said, and I heard the fear break through in my voice. The older man straightened up from my car window and looked at me for a long moment, and something shifted in his expression, like a mask slipping. "All right then," he said quietly, and somehow that was worse than if he'd gotten angry. They both walked back to their van without another word, got in and drove off north, disappearing around a bend in the highway. I stood there for maybe 30 seconds, legs shaking, before scrambling back into my car and locking all the doors. My hands fumbled with the ignition again, desperate, praying for a miracle, but still nothing. The sun was lower now, maybe an hour of daylight left, and the temperature was already starting to drop. I kept checking both mirrors, watching for any sign of movement, any approaching vehicles. About 10 minutes passed before I saw the white van coming back from the north, driving slowly in the southbound lane. They passed my car doing maybe 20 miles per hour, and through the windshield I could see them both staring at me. They didn't stop this time, just continued south until they were out of sight. But I knew they'd be back. The pattern was starting. I grabbed my water bottle, my phone charger, useless as it was, and my wallet, shoving them into my purse. If I had to run, if I had to leave the car, I needed to be ready. The desert on either side of the highway was rough terrain, low bushes, rocks, scattered cacti. But there was a cluster of larger rocks about 100 yards from the road that might offer cover. 5 minutes later, like clockwork, the van appeared again from the south. This time they pulled over on the opposite side of the highway, directly across from my car, and just sat there with the engine running, I could see the driver's silhouette through their windshield, unmoving, watching. The younger one got out and walked to the back of their van, opened the rear doors, and started doing something I couldn't see. The metallic sounds that drifted across the highway made my skin prickle. Tools being moved, something heavy being dragged. He closed the doors and got back in, and they drove off north again. But this time, only about a quarter-mile up the road, I saw their brake lights come on. They pulled onto a dirt access road I hadn't even noticed before, and the van disappeared behind a small rise. They were staying close, they were waiting for full darkness. I knew with absolute certainty that when the sun finished setting, they would come back, and this time they wouldn't just drive by. My dad's voice echoed in my head from when I was a teenager. Never let them take you to a second location. Whatever happens, you fight or run, but you never get in their vehicle. The next 20 minutes were the longest of my life. I sat there gripping my phone, periodically holding it up, trying to catch signal, watching that dirt road where they'd vanished. Then finally, a miracle. A semi-truck appeared in the distance, heading south. I burst out of my car, running into the highway, waving frantically with both arms. The truck's air horn blasted as the driver hit the brakes, pulling over just past my car. A woman climbed down from the cab, maybe in her 40s, wearing a Peterbilt cap and looking concerned. "Honey, what's wrong?" she asked, and I nearly collapsed with relief at seeing another woman. I explained everything in a rush: the broken car, the two men, the circling. Her expression hardened immediately. "Get your stuff, you're coming with me," she said, "now." As I grabbed my purse from the car, I saw the white van pulling out from the dirt road, heading our way fast. The truck driver saw it too. "Move!" she barked, and I ran to her truck, climbing up into the cab as quickly as I could. She was already on her CB radio before I got my door closed, calling out on Channel 19, telling anyone listening that there was a situation at mile marker 267. The white van had pulled up behind my abandoned car, and both men were out, standing in the road, watching us. The truck driver started pulling away, and I watched through the side mirror as the men just stood there, not following, just watching until we rounded a curve. "You're lucky I came along," the driver said. Her name was Catherine, I learned. This stretch of 87 is notorious. Those two fit the description of guys who've been reported before, but they're smart. Never do anything that could get them arrested. Just terrorize women until they're scared enough to make a mistake. She drove me all the way to a truck stop in Camp Verde where there was cell service and bright lights and people everywhere. While I waited for my roommate to come get me, Catherine stayed with me, bought me coffee, and made sure I called the highway patrol to report everything. They took the information but said without a license plate or any actual crime, there wasn't much they could do. My roommate Ashley picked me up around 10 that night, and we went back for my car the next morning with her brother and his friend, both big guys who worked construction. The car was still there, untouched, but the driver's side door was unlocked even though I was certain I'd locked it when I ran to Catherine's truck. Nothing was missing, but everything in the glove compartment had been gone through, papers scattered on the passenger seat. The registration with my home address was sitting on top, placed there deliberately like a message. Ashley's brother got the car started with a jump and some tinkering. Turned out it was just a loose battery cable, something that could have been fixed in 2 minutes if I'd known what to look for. We drove back in convoy, and I kept checking my mirrors the whole way, expecting to see that white van appear again. It never did, but for weeks afterward, every white van I saw made my heart race. I changed my route to work, varied my schedule, even stayed with Ashley for a while because I kept imagining those men had my address, knew where I lived. About 3 months later, I was grabbing coffee before my shift when I overheard two women at the next table talking. One was describing how her sister had broken down on Highway 87 and been circled by two men in a white van until a state trooper happened to drive by. Same description, same tactics, same stretch of highway. She said her sister was so traumatized she wouldn't drive alone anymore. I introduced myself, shared my story, and found out there were others too. A whole informal network of women who'd experienced the same thing with what seemed to be the same men. We filed a group report with the state police, gave them dates, times, detailed descriptions. Last I heard, they increased patrols on that stretch of highway, but as far as I know, those men were never caught. I still take that route sometimes when I visit Sedona, but never alone, never in the late afternoon, and I always make sure my phone is fully charged with a portable battery backup. The desert is beautiful, but it's also empty. And in that emptiness, there are people who wait for women like me to break down, who know exactly how far they can push before it becomes a crime, who understand that fear itself can be a weapon even if they never lay a hand on you. Last April found me hauling a load of furniture from Portland down to Albuquerque, one of those runs where you're fighting drowsiness more than traffic. I'd been driving commercially for about 6 years at that point, mostly western routes, and the isolation never bothered me much. Actually preferred it to the congested interstates. My wife Amy always worried about me taking the back roads to shave off time, said I was asking for trouble avoiding the main highways. That particular Tuesday, somewhere in eastern Utah on Route 191, I learned she was right. The stretch between Monticello and Blanding is desolate even during peak season, but in April, it's practically abandoned. I'd passed maybe 3 vehicles in the previous 2 hours, and the CB radio had been silent except for static since I'd left the interstate behind. The sun was getting low, painting those red rock formations in shades of copper and rust, when I spotted him about a quarter mile ahead. Guy was standing next to a beat-up Ford Ranger, hood popped open, waving both arms above his head like he was flagging down a rescue helicopter. Something about the way he moved seemed desperate, almost theatrical. He wore a flannel shirt that looked too clean for someone who'd been broken down long, and jeans that still had crisp creases. The truck itself looked wrong too, dusty in that artificial way, like someone had thrown dirt on it rather than driven through it. But you see enough people in genuine distress out here, and you learn not to leave them stranded. Cell service is non-existent for miles in any direction, and nighttime temperatures can drop fast. I downshifted and started easing my rig onto the shoulder, gravel crunching under 18 wheels. Right as I was setting the air brakes, movement in my passenger side mirror caught my attention. Another figure emerged from the juniper trees about 30 feet behind my trailer, walking with this measured pace that immediately set off every alarm in my head. This one was bigger, wearing a dark hoodie despite the warm evening, and carrying something long in his right hand. The metal caught the dying sunlight, a tire iron, the 4-way kind truckers use. He wasn't hurrying, just walking steady and deliberate, like a man who knew exactly what he was doing. The guy by the Ford was still waving, but now he'd started jogging toward my cab, and his expression had changed. What I'd taken for desperation from a distance looked more like anticipation up close. His mouth was moving like he was shouting something, but I couldn't hear him over my engine's idle. The math hit me all at once. 2 men, one exit blocked by the guy coming from behind, the other approaching my driver's door, and my truck jackknifed enough that backing up would take precious seconds I didn't have. Route 191 stretched empty in both directions, not a single pair of headlights visible in the fading light. They'd picked this spot perfectly, probably been waiting in those trees for hours until the right target came along. Someone alone, someone who'd stopped to help, someone whose disappearance might not be noticed for days. My dispatcher wouldn't expect a check-in until morning, and Amy thought I was taking I-70 anyway. The hooded man was maybe 20 feet from my trailer now, and the flannel shirt guy had reached my fuel tank, still playing the part of the grateful motorist, even though we both knew the charade was over. Training and instinct kicked in before conscious thought. I released the brakes and slammed the truck into gear, not caring about the grinding protest from the transmission. The flannel shirt guy jumped back as I lurched forward, his fake concerned expression finally dropping into something cold and calculating. Through my driver's side mirror, I watched the hooded man break into a run, that tire iron raised now like he might actually try to smash my taillights or worse. But a loaded semi doesn't accelerate like a car. Those first 50 feet felt like running through molasses while 2 predators closed in. The engine roared as I pushed it harder than I should have, black smoke pouring from my stacks. Flannel Shirt made a grab for my door handle as I passed, and I heard his palm slap against the metal before he lost his grip. In that split second, I got a clear look at his face. Weathered, maybe 40, with pale blue eyes that looked absolutely empty of anything resembling humanity. The speedometer climbed agonizingly slow, 20, 30, 35, while I watched both men in my mirrors getting smaller but not giving up. They actually ran after me for a good 100 yards before stopping in the middle of the road. That's when I saw the third detail that made my chest tighten. Another vehicle, a white van pulling out from a dirt access road about a half-mile ahead of where they'd set their trap. It had been hidden behind a cluster of boulders, completely invisible until now. The van's headlights flicked on and it started moving in my direction. Not fast, just steady and purposeful. These guys had a whole system. The bait, the muscle, and the chase vehicle. How many times had they done this before? How many drivers hadn't been lucky enough to spot that second man in time? I grabbed my CB radio with one hand while shifting gears with the other, scanning through channels and calling out for anyone listening. Nothing but dead air and static came back. The van was gaining on me, eating up the distance while my truck struggled to build momentum with 40,000 pounds of furniture weighing it down. They knew exactly what they were doing, probably calculated how long it would take a loaded semi to reach highway speed from a dead stop. My phone sat in the cup holder, useless as a brick without signal. The nearest town, Blanding, was still 12 miles ahead, and the last town behind me was over 20. For the next 10 minutes, it would just be me, them, and empty asphalt surrounded by desert. The van got close enough that I could see two silhouettes through its windshield, patient and unhurried, like they knew I had nowhere to go. Then I remembered something from my rookie days, something an old-timer named Frank taught me at a truck stop in Nevada. When you're heavy in someone's light, you use the weight. I waited until the road curved ahead, a gentle bend to the right with a steep drop-off on the left side. The van was maybe 3 car lengths behind me now, riding my bumper like they were waiting for me to wear down or make a mistake. As we entered the curve, I suddenly yanked my wheel hard left, then immediately corrected right, sending my trailer into a controlled fishtail. 40,000 pounds of furniture swung out like a massive steel whip. The van driver saw it coming but had nowhere to go, the guardrail on his right, my trailer swinging toward his left. He slammed his brakes and jerked the wheel, tires screaming against asphalt. The van went sideways, slid toward the shoulder, overcorrected, and spun completely around before coming to a stop facing the wrong direction in a cloud of tire smoke and dust. I didn't wait to see if they'd recover. My truck was already gaining speed, hitting 50, then 60, pushing that diesel engine harder than I'd ever pushed it before. In my mirrors, I could see the van trying to turn around, its headlights sweeping across the desert landscape like searchlights. But I'd gained enough distance now, and more importantly, I'd shown them I wasn't going to be an easy target. They must have decided it wasn't worth the chase because after another mile, those headlights stopped getting closer, then started fading into the darkness behind me. My whole body was shaking from adrenaline, shirt soaked through with sweat despite the air conditioning blasting. I kept checking those mirrors every few seconds, expecting to see those headlights racing up behind me again, but they never came. Still, I didn't slow down until I saw the first lights of Blanding appearing in the distance, civilization finally breaking through the darkness like a promise of safety. The first place I stopped was a well-lit gas station right off the main drag, one of those big truck stops with security cameras on every corner. My legs nearly gave out when I climbed down from the cab, the adrenaline crash hitting hard. I called 911 from the payphone. My cell still showed no service, and told them everything. The state trooper who showed up about 30 minutes later, a younger guy named Officer Brennan, took my statement, but seemed skeptical at first. Until he made a few radio calls and found out that 2 other truckers had reported similar incidents on that same stretch in the past 3 months, though neither had been as lucky as me in getting away clean. One had his tires slashed when he stopped, barely escaped on foot. The other, they found his abandoned rig 2 days later, blood on the driver's seat, driver still missing. Officer Brennan organized a search that night with backup from the county sheriff's department. They found the spot I described. Fresh tire marks on the shoulder, footprints in the dirt where the hooded man had emerged from the trees, even some cigarette butts where they'd been waiting. The Ford Ranger was gone, of course, probably never broken down in the first place. But here's the detail that still gives me chills. They found a shallow pit dug back in the trees, about 50 feet from the road, covered with branches. Inside were 3 wallets, 2 trucker logbooks, and a wedding ring. The FBI got involved after that, turned it into a federal investigation. Brennan called me a week later to tell me they'd arrested 2 men matching my descriptions at a motel in Colorado, driving a white van with Utah plates. The third guy, the one who'd been driving the van during my encounter, was still on the run last I heard. I finished that delivery to Albuquerque 2 days late, my hand still unsteady every time I gripped the wheel. Told my dispatcher I'd had mechanical problems, couldn't bring myself to explain the real reason yet. Amy knew something was wrong the second I walked through our front door. Said I looked like I'd aged 5 years in 1 week. I told her everything that night, holding her tight while she cried, and made me promise to never take those isolated routes again. I kept that promise for about 6 months, stuck to the interstates even if it meant adding hours to my runs. But trucking is about margins and deadlines, and eventually, I started taking back roads again. Different ones though. Never Route 191, never that stretch between Monticello and Blanding. I installed a dash cam, front and rear facing, and I keep a loaded .38 in my door pocket now, all legal and permitted. Some nights I still dream about those pale blue eyes and that measured walk from the trees. Wonder about that missing driver, whether his family ever got answers. But mostly I just drive, stay alert, and never ever stop for anyone on an empty road. Interstate 15 stretches through some of the emptiest parts of California, and that's exactly where my girlfriend Megan and I found ourselves last August around midnight. We'd been dating for about 8 months, and this was supposed to be our first real vacation together. A week in San Diego, nothing fancy, just beach time and good food. I was 27 then, working as a warehouse supervisor in Bakersfield, pulling long shifts that left me exhausted most weekends. Megan taught 3rd grade at a local elementary school, and she'd been planning this trip for months, marking spots on maps and bookmarking restaurants on her phone. We'd decided to drive through the night to avoid traffic and the brutal desert heat, figuring we'd switch off every couple hours and arrive fresh in the morning. The plan seemed perfect when we'd discussed it over takeout Chinese food in my apartment 2 weeks earlier. Everything was going smoothly, until we hit that stretch past Victorville where the exits become fewer and farther between. Megan had dozed off in the passenger seat, her head resting against the window, and I was fighting to stay alert, cycling through radio stations that all seemed to fade into static. The dashboard clock showed 12:47 a.m. when I saw what I thought was our exit 178, according to a weathered green sign that caught my headlights for just a second. The GPS had gone quiet about 20 minutes earlier, which should have been my first warning, but I figured it was just recalculating or something. I took the exit, expecting to see signs for a gas station or at least some indication we were still heading the right direction. Instead, the off-ramp curved sharply and dumped us onto a narrow 2-lane road with no streetlights, no signs, nothing but cracked asphalt disappearing into darkness. The temperature gauge on my Ford Explorer showed it was still 89 degrees outside, and the air conditioning was working overtime, filling the car with that mechanical hum that usually put me to sleep. I drove for maybe 3 minutes on that road, going about 35 mph because I couldn't see more than 50 feet ahead, even with my high beams on. The asphalt was rough, full of patches and cracks that made the Explorer bounce and sway. I kept checking the rearview mirror, hoping to see the glow of the interstate behind us, but there was only blackness. That's when I decided to pull over and wake Megan up, figure out where the hell we were. I found a wider spot on the shoulder, really just a patch of dirt and gravel, and put the car in park. The moment I turned on the dome light, Megan stirred and stretched, asking in that groggy voice if we were at a rest stop. I told her I thought I'd taken the wrong exit and needed to check the GPS. She grabbed her phone from the cup holder, and I watched her face change as she realized we had no signal, not even one bar. Mine was the same, just that useless no service message where the carrier name should be. We sat there for maybe 30 seconds, both of us trying our phones, when I noticed something in the side mirror. A car had appeared behind us, maybe 40 feet back, just sitting there in the middle of the road. The weird thing was it didn't have its headlights on. I could only make out its shape because my taillights were casting this dim red glow. Megan hadn't noticed it yet. She was still messing with her phone trying to get the offline maps to load. I kept watching that car in the mirror, waiting for it to go around us, but it just sat there, engine running. I could hear it idling, this low rumble that seemed too loud for a regular car. After what felt like a full minute but was probably only 15 seconds, I put the Explorer back in drive and pulled back onto the road, figuring whoever it was would either pass us or fall back. But as soon as I started moving, the car behind us started moving too, maintaining that same 40-foot distance, still without any lights on. Megan looked up when she felt us accelerating, asking why I was driving so fast. I'd pushed it up to about 50 mph without realizing it. That's when she turned around and saw the car behind us, this dark shape barely visible in our taillights' glow. She asked me why they didn't have their lights on, and I told her I didn't know, but we needed to find our way back to the interstate. The road ahead kept curving, these long, sweeping turns that made it impossible to see what was coming. Every time I sped up, the car behind us sped up. When I slowed down to about 30 mph to test them, they slowed down too, always keeping that exact same distance. Megan was gripping the door handle now, her knuckles white, telling me to just keep driving, we'd find something eventually. But the road just kept going. No cross streets, no buildings, not even a damn mile marker. The only sounds were our engine, the AC blasting, and that persistent rumble from the car behind us. Then the car behind us suddenly accelerated, closing the gap to maybe 10 feet in just a couple seconds. Their front bumper was practically touching ours, and that's when Megan started yelling for me to go faster. I floored it, pushing the Explorer up to 70 mph on this narrow, dark road, taking curves way too fast. The other car fell back a bit, but then surged forward again, and this time I heard a tap. They'd actually bumped us. Not hard enough to send us spinning, but enough to make the Explorer jerk forward. Megan was on the verge of panic, shouting that we needed to turn somewhere, anywhere. But there were no turns, just this endless strip of cracked asphalt bordered by desert scrub, and the occasional Joshua tree caught in our headlights. I kept checking the mirrors, and in one of those checks, I saw something that made my chest tighten. There was another set of lights way behind the first car, also with no headlights on, just barely visible in the darkness. The first car started swerving slightly, moving left and right behind us like it was trying to find an angle to come alongside us. The road was too narrow for them to pass safely, but I got the feeling safety wasn't exactly their concern. Megan spotted a dirt road coming up on the right, barely visible, just a break in the scrub brush. She screamed at me to take it, and I yanked the wheel hard, feeling the Explorer's tires slide on the loose dirt as we made the turn. For a second I thought we were going to roll, but the car somehow stayed upright, fishtailing wildly before I got control back. Behind us, the first car overshot the turn, their brakes screeching as they tried to stop. But that gave us maybe a 10-second lead, and I used every bit of it, pushing the Explorer as hard as I could on this dirt road that was even worse than the paved one. The suspension was taking a beating, and I could hear rocks pinging off the undercarriage, but I didn't care. Megan was twisted around in her seat watching behind us, and she said they'd made the turn and were coming fast. The dirt road split into two paths after about a quarter mile, and I chose left without thinking, just trying to be unpredictable. The path immediately narrowed, becoming more of a trail than a road, with brush scraping against both sides of the Explorer. I had to slow down to maybe 25 mph or risk destroying the car on the deep ruts and rocks. That's when Megan grabbed my arm and pointed ahead. There was a structure up there, some kind of old building, maybe an abandoned gas station or something. It was hard to tell in the darkness, but there were definitely walls and what looked like a collapsed roof on one side. I pulled around behind it, killing the headlights immediately and turning off the engine. We sat there in absolute darkness, both of us breathing hard, listening. At first, there was nothing but the ticking of our cooling engine and the blood pounding in my ears. Then we heard it. Engines approaching, getting louder. They were coming down the trail we'd taken. Through a gap in the broken wall, I could see headlight beams sweeping across the desert. They'd turned their lights on now, probably to navigate the rough trail. The first car crept past the building, going slow, like they were searching. It was an old Chevrolet Suburban, dark-colored with mud caked on the license plates. I couldn't see the driver through the tinted windows. They stopped about 50 yards past our hiding spot, and I heard doors opening. Megan squeezed my hand so hard I thought she might break my fingers. We could hear voices, male voices, but couldn't make out what they were saying. Then the second vehicle pulled up, a pickup truck, also with mudded plates. More doors opened, and I counted at least 4 different voices now. They were spreading out, flashlight beams cutting through the darkness in different directions. One beam swept across the building we were hiding behind, and we both ducked down even though we were already hidden. The voices were getting closer, and I could finally make out some words. They were discussing whether we'd continued on the trail or doubled back. That's when Megan did something I'll never forget. She reached into the back seat, grabbed her purse, and pulled out this little canister of bear spray she always carried, a habit from growing up in Montana. She whispered that if they found us, she'd spray them and I should drive through them if necessary. We were both terrified, but having some kind of plan made it slightly better. The footsteps were getting closer to our hiding spot, when suddenly one of them shouted something about fresh tire tracks heading the opposite direction, back toward the fork in the trail. There was a bunch of confused discussion, then the sound of them jogging back to their vehicles. Engines started up again and we heard them turning around, heading back the way they'd come. We stayed frozen for probably 5 more minutes, not daring to move or even whisper. When I finally started the Explorer again, I kept the lights off and crept forward slowly, using just the moonlight to navigate. Megan was using her phone's flashlight sparingly, just quick flashes to make sure we weren't about to drive off a cliff or something. The trail continued for what felt like hours but was probably only 20 minutes. We came to another fork, and this time I could see power lines running along the right path. Power lines meant civilization, so that's the way we went. My nerves were completely shot, and every shadow looked like another car waiting to ambush us. Megan kept checking behind us, but there was nothing, just empty darkness. Finally, gloriously, the dirt trail connected to an actual paved road with a yellow center line. I had no idea where we were, but it was a real road, and that was all that mattered. I turned right randomly and drove for maybe 10 minutes before we saw lights in the distance. A 24-hour gas station, one of those truck stop places with the bright fluorescent canopy. I've never been so happy to see a gas station in my life. We pulled in, parked right in front of the doors where it was brightest, and just sat there for a minute, both of us shaking from the adrenaline crash. Inside the gas station, while Megan used the bathroom, I asked the clerk if he knew where we were. Turned out we were about 40 miles from where we should have been, near some town called Helendale that I'd never heard of. The clerk, this older guy with a graying beard, said we weren't the first people to come in looking rattled from that area. Apparently there was some kind of criminal operation out there. He wasn't sure exactly what, maybe drug manufacturing or human trafficking, but locals knew to avoid those back roads after dark. He said we were lucky. Some people who took that wrong exit were never seen again, and he wasn't joking when he said it. We called the police from the gas station, but they said without license plates or better descriptions, there wasn't much they could do. They took a report over the phone and said they'd increase patrols in the area. We ended up driving the rest of the way to San Diego in broad daylight, taking only major highways, stopping only at busy rest stops. We still had our vacation, tried to enjoy the beach and restaurants, but neither of us slept well the entire week. Even now, 3 years later, I never drive at night if I can help it, and I've never taken an unfamiliar exit again. The drive from my sister's place in Missouri back to Oklahoma should have been just another boring 8-hour stretch of highway. I'd made that same trip at least a dozen times since she moved there for her teaching job, and by now I had the whole route memorized. Every exit, every decent rest stop, even which gas stations had the cleanest bathrooms. It was late February 2022, one of those weird days where the weather couldn't decide if it wanted to be winter or spring, and I'd left her house around 7 in the morning to beat the weekend traffic. I remember feeling good that morning, relaxed even, with a thermos of her homemade coffee and a playlist of true crime podcasts queued up for the journey. My sister Janet had just told me she was pregnant, and I spent the first hour of the drive thinking about baby names and whether I'd be the cool aunt or the responsible one. About 2 hours into the drive, somewhere near the state line, I pulled into a rest area because the coffee was already working its magic on my bladder. The parking lot was pretty empty, just a handful of cars and trucks scattered around, which wasn't unusual for a Sunday morning. I noticed a black Tahoe parked a few spaces away from me, engine still running, with tinted windows so dark I couldn't see inside. The only reason it caught my attention was because of the license plate frame. It had this weird holographic eagle design that seemed to shimmer and change colors as I walked past. When I came out of the restroom, there was a man standing near the vending machines, tall and lanky, wearing a faded denim jacket with patches I couldn't quite make out from where I was. He had this peculiar way of standing, with his weight all on one leg like a flamingo, and his hair was this unnatural shade of copper that looked like he'd dyed it himself in a motel bathroom. We made eye contact for maybe half a second, and he gave me this quick nod before turning back to the vending machine, feeding quarters into it with deliberate slowness. I didn't think much about it at the time. Rest stops attract all kinds of people, and I'd learned long ago not to make assumptions about strangers on the road. But about an hour later, when I stopped at a Love's truck stop to grab some snacks and top off my gas tank, I saw that same black Tahoe pulling in right after me. Not directly behind me, but close enough that I noticed the eagle license plate frame catching the sunlight again. This time the driver stayed in the vehicle, but I could feel eyes on me as I walked into the store. I grabbed a bag of pretzels and a Diet Coke, trying to convince myself that lots of people take the same route on Sundays, that it was just my true crime podcasts making me paranoid. The cashier, a kid with braces and a name tag that said Dustin, was chatting about the weather while he rang me up, but I kept glancing toward the parking lot through the window. The Tahoe was still there, parked at an angle where the driver could see both the store entrance and my car, a beat-up Toyota Camry that suddenly seemed way too vulnerable. When I walked back to my car, I made a point of looking directly at the Tahoe, trying to see through those tinted windows, but it was like staring at a black mirror. I even did that thing where you pretend to check something in your trunk just to buy time, hoping they'd leave first, but the engine just kept idling. Finally, I got in my car and pulled out, watching in my rear view as the Tahoe waited about 30 seconds before following. They stayed back, maybe 3 or 4 cars behind me on the highway, but every time I changed lanes to pass a slower vehicle, they did the same thing, maintaining that same careful distance. My podcasts kept playing, but I wasn't listening anymore. Instead, I was watching that dark shape in my mirror, memorizing the shape of the grille, the way one headlight seemed slightly dimmer than the other, the small orange parking permit sticker on the lower left corner of the windshield. The third time I saw them was at a rest area near Veneta, and that's when my gut started screaming that something was seriously wrong. I'd deliberately taken an exit I never usually take, one of those small ones with just a single gas station and a McDonald's, thinking if they followed me here, it couldn't be coincidence anymore. I sat in the McDonald's parking lot for a full 5 minutes, engine running, watching the exit ramp in my mirror. Nothing. Relief washed through me, and I actually laughed at myself, thinking about how I'd tell Janet this story and we'd joke about my overactive imagination. But when I walked into the McDonald's to use their restroom, I saw him again, the copper-haired man from the first rest stop, sitting in a corner booth with a cup of coffee and no food, his denim jacket folded on the seat beside him. He was wearing a white t-shirt underneath with what looked like burn marks or old stains across the chest, and he had this way of holding his coffee cup with just his fingertips, like it was something delicate or dangerous. Our eyes met again, and this time he didn't nod or look away. He just stared, his face completely expressionless, like he was memorizing my features. I practically ran to the bathroom, locked myself in a stall, and called Janet with trembling fingers. She didn't answer, probably in her Sunday faculty meeting, so I left a voicemail trying to sound casual, just saying I was taking a break and would be home later than expected. When I came out of the bathroom, he was gone, but his coffee cup was still there, still full, with steam rising from it like he'd just left seconds ago. Through the window, I could see the black Tahoe now parked right next to my Camry, so close that I'd have to squeeze to get into my driver's door. The parking lot had plenty of open spaces, dozens of them, but they'd chosen that spot deliberately, sending a message I was starting to understand with crystal clarity. I had to turn sideways to get into my car, my back pressed against my Camry while I fumbled with the keys. And that's when I smelled it, this thick chemical smell coming from the Tahoe, like industrial cleaner mixed with something metallic. There was a parking stub on their dashboard from somewhere called Beckman Storage Facility with yesterday's date, and through the tiny gap in their tinted windows, I could see what looked like rolls of plastic sheeting in the back seat. My brain kept trying to find innocent explanations, but my body was already in full panic mode. I managed to get in my car and immediately locked all the doors, my heart hammering so hard I could hear it in my ears. I pulled out fast, tires squealing a little, not caring how it looked, and merged back onto the highway doing at least 20 over the speed limit. The Tahoe followed within minutes, back to that same measured distance, and I realized with growing horror that they weren't trying to catch me. They were hurting me, pushing me towards something or somewhere specific. I started doing the math in my head. It was about 2 p.m. now. Still broad daylight, still plenty of traffic on the highway, but I was heading into a stretch I knew well, where the exits got farther apart and the small towns got smaller. My phone showed 3 bars of signal, but that would drop to nothing in about 40 miles, right around the Turner County area where there was that dead zone everyone complained about. I couldn't go home. They'd follow me there, know where I lived. I couldn't keep driving. Eventually I'd need gas again and my tank was already below half. Calling 911 seemed crazy because what would I say? A car was following me but keeping their distance? A creepy guy happened to be at the same rest stops? They hadn't technically done anything illegal yet, just made me deeply, profoundly afraid. But then I remembered something my dad had taught me years ago when I first started driving alone. If you think someone's following you, take 4 right turns or 4 left turns, basically driving in a circle, and if they're still behind you, you know for sure. The next exit was for a place called Waukita, barely a dot on the map, but I took it anyway, my turn signal clicking like a countdown timer. The Tahoe followed. I turned right at the stop sign at the bottom of the ramp. They followed. Right again at the defunct Sonic Drive-In. They followed. Right at the boarded-up Methodist church. They followed. By the 4th right turn, which brought me back to the same stop sign, they were still there, not even pretending anymore, staying just 1 car length behind me now. That's when I saw him clearly for the first time, the driver, because he'd rolled down his window. It wasn't the copper-haired man. This was someone else. Older, with a gray beard trimmed into a perfect square shape and wearing sunglasses that reflected my car in their lenses. He lifted his hand and pointed at me, then pointed to the side of the road, like he was giving me an instruction. The gesture was calm, almost polite, which somehow made it infinitely worse than if he'd been screaming or threatening. I gunned it back onto the highway, my speedometer hitting 90, weaving through traffic like a lunatic, other drivers honking at me, and for a few precious minutes, I couldn't see them anywhere. I took the next exit without signaling, a last-second swerve that almost sent me into the guardrail, and found myself in another tiny town, this one with a main street that was basically 3 blocks of nothing. But there was a police station, a tiny brick building with one patrol car parked outside. I pulled into their lot so fast my tires screeched and I ran to the door, yanking on it. Locked. Sunday. Of course it was locked on Sunday. There was an emergency number taped to the door, but as I was putting it into my phone, I heard that familiar engine sound. The Tahoe rolled slowly past the police station, not stopping, just cruising by like they were sightseeing. Through the windshield, I could now see there were 2 people in the front, the bearded driver and someone else in the passenger seat, a smaller figure wearing what looked like a medical mask, the white paper kind, even though COVID precautions had mostly ended months ago. They circled the block while I stood there in the police station parking lot, coming around again and again, 3 times total, each pass slower than the last. On the 3rd pass, the passenger window rolled down, and the person in the medical mask held something up, my sister's address. Not just the street name, but her actual house number written on a piece of cardboard in thick black marker, held up just long enough for me to read it clearly. Janet's address. They knew where I'd been, where I'd come from, who I'd been visiting. My legs nearly gave out, and I had to lean against the patrol car to stay upright. That's when I noticed the patrol car wasn't locked. The door was actually slightly open, like someone had just stepped out for a moment. Without thinking, just pure instinct and desperation, I yanked the door open and dove inside, slamming it shut and hitting the lock button. The radio was right there, the handset hanging on its hook, and even though I had no idea how to use it properly, I grabbed it and started pressing buttons, screaming into it that I needed help, that someone was following me, that I was at the Waukita police station in a patrol car. The Tahoe had stopped in the middle of the street, both occupants now out of the vehicle, standing on either side of it like they were discussing what to do next. The copper-haired man from the rest stops emerged from the back seat. There had been 3 of them the whole time. He was carrying something that looked like a modified tire iron with duct tape wrapped around one end, and he started walking toward the patrol car with that same emotionless expression. That's when the radio crackled to life, a dispatcher's voice asking for my location again, saying units were already on their way, that I should stay in the vehicle and keep the doors locked. The 3 of them heard it too. The radio was loud enough, and they looked at each other for a long moment. The bearded man said something to the others, and they all walked back to the Tahoe without hurrying, like they had all the time in the world. They drove away slowly, turning left at the end of the main street, and I sat there shaking so hard my teeth were chattering, watching until I couldn't see them anymore. The dispatcher still talking to me through the radio, asking me questions I could barely process. 2 patrol cars showed up within 8 minutes, though it felt like hours sitting in that vehicle, jumping at every car that passed. The officers were professional but skeptical at first, until they ran the Tahoe's plates from my description and found it was registered to a defunct LLC with a fake address. They took my statement, called in state troopers, and one officer followed me all the way to the Oklahoma border while another drove ahead. They never found the Tahoe or the 3 people, but 2 weeks later, a detective called me. They'd found the vehicle abandoned in a field near Joplin, completely burned out, with stolen plates from Kansas. Inside the charred remains, they found zip ties, a roll of duct tape, and traces of blood that didn't match anyone in the system. The detective said I was lucky, that these looked like professionals who'd done this before, maybe human traffickers or something worse. He said my decision to use the police radio probably saved my life, that they knew the response time would be too quick to grab me and get away clean. I never made that drive alone again. Janet ended up moving back to Oklahoma 3 months later. She said it was because of her husband's job, but I knew the real reason. We never talked about what might have happened if I hadn't stopped at that police station, if that patrol car had been locked, if the radio hadn't worked. The detective called a few more times with updates that weren't really updates, just dead ends and cold trails. I still see black SUVs everywhere, still check my mirrors obsessively, still feel my chest tighten at rest stops. Sometimes I wonder if they picked me randomly, or if they'd been watching me for longer than just that day. The not knowing is almost worse than the fear was. But I'm alive. I'm here typing this, and that's more than some people get. If you're reading this and you ever get that feeling that someone's following you, don't dismiss it. Don't worry about looking paranoid. Trust your gut. Find somewhere safe and make noise. Make lots of noise. It might be the only thing that saves you. The semester had just ended, and I was driving from my college in Virginia all the way down to my parents' place in Georgia. It was May 2017, and I remember the relief of finishing my junior year mixed with exhaustion from finals week. I'd been putting off sleep for days, cramming for exams, and now I was paying for it behind the wheel of my beat-up 2003 Nissan Altima. The car had been my grandfather's before he passed, and while it wasn't pretty with its fading silver paint and cracked dashboard, it had never let me down. I was 21, stubborn as hell, and convinced I could make the entire 14-hour drive without stopping for the night. My mom had begged me to split the trip into 2 days, but I just wanted to get home, collapse in my childhood bed, and not think about organic chemistry for at least 3 months. By the time I hit somewhere near the North Carolina-South Carolina border, I'd been driving for 12 hours straight. My eyes were burning, and I kept catching myself drifting toward the rumble strips on the shoulder. The highway was practically empty at 2 in the morning, just the occasional 18-wheeler thundering past, and the monotony of the road was becoming hypnotic. I knew I needed to stop before I became another statistic. That's when I saw the blue sign for a rest area coming up in 2 miles. The place looked completely deserted when I pulled in. No trucks in the parking spots designated for them, no families walking their dogs, just a small brick building with vending machines glowing through the windows, and a few streetlights casting orange pools on the cracked asphalt. I parked near the building but not directly under a light, cracked my windows for air, reclined my seat, and set my phone alarm for a 20-minute power nap. Maybe 5 minutes after I closed my eyes, I heard another car pulling into the rest area. The engine had this distinctive rattle, like something was loose under the hood, and the headlights swept across my windshield as it turned into the parking area. I kept my eyes closed, figuring it was just another tired traveler like me, but I listened as the car parked maybe 4 or 5 spaces away from mine. The engine shut off, and I heard a door open and close. Through my barely open eyelids, I could see someone get out. A man, tall and thin, wearing what looked like a dark jacket despite the warm night. He lit a cigarette and leaned against his car, a burgundy sedan that had seen better days. The tip of his cigarette glowed orange in the darkness, and I could hear him coughing occasionally. Something about the way he stood there, not walking to the restroom, not stretching his legs, just smoking and staring in the direction of my car, made my chest tighten with unease. I tried to convince myself I was being paranoid. The guy was probably just taking a break like me, maybe working up the nerve to use those sketchy rest stop bathrooms that always smell like industrial cleaner and desperation. But he finished his cigarette, flicked it onto the pavement, and instead of getting back in his car or heading to the building, he just stood there. I could barely make out his silhouette in the dim light, but I could tell he was facing my direction. My rational brain kept saying I was overreacting. Exhaustion makes you paranoid, everyone knows that. Still, I shifted slightly to reach for my keys in the ignition just in case. That's when he started walking. Not toward the restroom building, not back to his car, but directly toward mine. His footsteps were slow and deliberate on the asphalt, and I could hear him humming something tuneless under his breath. Every instinct in my body was screaming at me to start the car and leave, but I was trapped in that weird space between not wanting to seem crazy and knowing something was genuinely wrong. He stopped right next to my driver's side door. I kept my eyes mostly closed, pretending to be asleep, but through my lashes I could see him lean down to look through my window. His face was inches from the glass, and I could smell the cigarette smoke seeping through the crack I'd left for air. He had this weathered face, maybe mid-40s, with deep-set eyes and stubble that looked like it hadn't been dealt with in days. His breath fogged up my window as he peered inside, and then he did something that made every muscle in my body go rigid. He tried the door handle. Just a gentle pull at first, testing it. Thank God I'd had the sense to lock the doors when I parked. When it didn't open, he pulled harder, yanking on it twice, 3 times, the whole car rocking slightly with the force. Then he pressed his mouth close to the window crack and whispered my name. "Brandon," he said, drawing it out like we were old friends. "Brandon, come on, open up." I'd never seen this man before in my life. My student ID was in my wallet in my pocket, not visible anywhere in the car. My parking permit from school only had the permit number, no name. There was absolutely no way this random stranger at a rest stop in the middle of nowhere should know who I was. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it. I gripped my keys, ready to jam them into the ignition, but then his hand slammed against the window, making me jump. "I know you're awake, Brandon," he said, louder this time. "Your mom sent me to check on you. She's worried. Just crack the door so we can talk." The lie was so obvious it was insulting. My mom didn't even know which route I was taking home, and she definitely wouldn't send some sketchy stranger to find me at 2 in the morning. He kept talking, his voice getting more agitated, saying he'd driven all this way to help me, that I was being rude, that he just needed to make sure I was okay. His hand never left my window, fingers spread wide against the glass like a starfish, and I could see dirt caked under his fingernails. I finally gave up the pretense of sleeping and lunged for the ignition. My fingers were trembling so badly, it took me 2 tries to get the key in. The engine turned over immediately. Thank God for that old Nissan's reliability, and I threw it into drive. The man jumped back from the door, but not in surprise. He was smiling, this wide grin that showed too many teeth, and he called out, "See you soon, Brandon. Tell your sister Haley I said hi." That's what made me floor it out of there, tires squealing on the asphalt. My sister's name. He knew my sister's name. Haley was away at summer camp in Tennessee working as a counselor, and there was no earthly reason this stranger should know about her. I merged back onto the highway doing 90, constantly checking my rearview mirror. For about 10 minutes I saw nothing but darkness behind me. Then in the distance a single headlight appeared. One of his must have been out. The car with the rattling engine was following me, keeping pace no matter how fast I drove. I grabbed my phone, trying to call 911 while keeping one eye on the road and one on the mirror. The operator answered on the second ring, and I practically shouted my situation at her. Strange man at rest stop knew my name, tried to break into my car, now following me on Interstate 95 southbound. She asked for my exact location, but the mile markers were flying by too fast to read. She told me to take the next exit where there would be people, lights, witnesses. The next exit was 8 miles away according to the sign I'd just passed. 8 miles with this psycho behind me. I pushed the Nissan harder, hitting 100, the whole car shaking with the effort. The burgundy sedan stayed with me, sometimes falling back, sometimes gaining, but always there. When I finally saw the exit sign, I nearly cried with relief. It was one of those exits with a cluster of gas stations and fast food places right off the ramp. I took the curve too fast, tires screaming, and pulled straight into a Shell station that was blazing with fluorescent lights. There were 2 other cars at the pumps and a tanker truck parked on the side. I parked right in front of the store's glass doors, in the bright light where the security cameras could see everything. The burgundy sedan had followed me off the exit, and I watched in my mirror as it slowly cruised through the gas station lot. It stopped about 50 feet away, idling near the air pump. I could see the man's silhouette through his windshield, just sitting there, watching. I ran into the store, nearly knocking over a display of energy drinks, and went straight to the counter. The kid working there, maybe 19 with gauged ears and a name tag that said Corey, looked at me like I was insane. I told him someone was following me, that I'd called the cops, that I needed to stay in the store until they arrived. Corey immediately went from bored to alert, looking out at the burgundy sedan. "That him?" he asked, and when I nodded, he picked up the store phone and called his manager from the back. A huge guy named Bill came out, probably 300 pounds, a former football player, and stood by the door with his arms crossed, staring down the sedan. We waited like that for maybe 15 minutes before a state trooper pulled into the lot, lights flashing. The moment those blue lights appeared, the burgundy sedan's engine roared to life, that same rattling sound, and it peeled out of the lot, heading back toward the highway. The trooper tried to pursue, but by the time he turned around, the car was gone. I gave my statement, described everything I could remember about the man and his vehicle. The officer ran my plates, my license, even called my mom to verify I was who I said I was. She was hysterical when she heard what happened, kept asking how the man knew our names. The trooper had no explanation for that part. He suggested maybe the guy had seen mail in my car or something with my name on it, but I knew that wasn't true. My car was clean except for some empty water bottles and a phone charger. The officer followed me for the next 50 miles to make sure the sedan didn't come back, and I drove the rest of the way home in daylight, too wired on adrenaline and gas station coffee to even think about sleeping. The truly disturbing part came 3 days later. I was at home, finally starting to relax, telling myself it was just some random crazy person who'd maybe overheard my name somewhere, when my sister Haley called from camp. She was upset, confused, asking me why I'd given some man her work number. Apparently, someone had called the camp's main office claiming to be a family friend, specifically asking for her, saying there was a family emergency. The camp director, following protocol, had refused to put him through without verification. The man had gotten angry, mentioned me by name, said I'd told him to call. He knew which cabin she was assigned to, knew she was teaching archery that summer. Haley said the director recorded the call because the man sounded unstable, and when they played it for her, she didn't recognize the voice at all. Neither did I when she held her phone up to the recording, but I recognized that unsettling, tuneless humming in the background. It was him. Somehow, this stranger knew details about my family that you couldn't just find on social media. Haley's camp job wasn't posted anywhere online, and she'd specifically kept a low profile because of camp policies about counselors and internet presence. We never found out who he was or how he knew us. I filed police reports in multiple states, changed my route back to school that fall, even switched apartments. My parents installed a security system, and Haley left camp early. The investigating detective found the burgundy sedan abandoned in a Walmart parking lot in South Carolina 2 weeks later. It had been reported stolen from Maryland a month before my encounter. The owner had no connection to me or my family. Inside, they found maps with various college routes highlighted, dozens of student IDs from different schools. Mine wasn't among them, thankfully, and notebooks filled with names, addresses, and personal details about random people. My name was in there, along with Haley's, our parents' address, my class schedule from that spring, even the make and model of my car. But there was no explanation for why or how he'd gathered this information. The detective said it looked like he'd been doing this for years, following college students, learning about them, but they'd never had reports of him actually hurting anyone, just scaring them, just letting them know he was watching. They never caught him. Sometimes I still check my mirrors more than necessary when I drive, and I never stop at rest areas anymore. I'll drive on fumes until I find a proper exit with people around. The not knowing is what gets me. Not knowing who he was, why he chose me, or if he's still out there memorizing someone else's life. I had been on the road for hours that night, cutting across backcountry roads to save time on my way to a job interview the next morning. My old sedan wasn't exactly built for long hauls anymore, but I figured if I kept a steady pace and didn't push it too hard, I'd make it without trouble. The radio barely picked up anything out there, so I'd been driving in near silence, just the hum of the engine, and the occasional whoosh of wind sneaking through the worn seals on the windows. By the time the dashboard temperature needle started creeping into the red, I was in the middle of nowhere. No gas stations, no houses, not even a flicker of light on the horizon. I pulled over onto the gravel shoulder, the crunch under my tires unnervingly loud in the still night. Steam hissed from under the hood the moment I popped it open, curling upward in ghostly swirls before disappearing into the cool air. I didn't have the tools or the knowledge to fix whatever was going on, so I called a tow truck. The dispatcher told me it'd be at least an hour. That was fine, or at least it was until I saw the first set of headlights appear in my rear view. It was an old, boxy pickup, paint faded to the point where I couldn't even tell the original color. Instead of passing like any normal driver would, it slowed to a crawl as it came alongside me. I glanced over, expecting maybe a concerned driver asking if I needed help, but the cab's interior was pitch black. I couldn't see a face, a silhouette, nothing. The truck rolled past and continued down the road, its taillights shrinking into the dark. I tried to shake it off, telling myself it was just someone curious or cautious. A few minutes later, the same truck came back. This time, it didn't even pass me. It stopped maybe 100 yards away, just sitting there, idling, before killing its headlights completely. The only sounds were the faint chug of its engine and the high-pitched chorus of crickets in the tall grass. I kept glancing toward that shadowy shape on the road, my chest tightening with each passing second. That's when I caught movement, a slow, deliberate rustle in the grass, somewhere between me and where the truck was parked. I stayed perfectly still, listening. The rustling wasn't the random sway of grass in the breeze. It had a rhythm, like footsteps dragging through the stalks. Every so often the sound would pause, only to start again a few seconds later, closer than before. My phone felt like it weighed 100 pounds in my hand as I opened the flashlight app, but I didn't turn it on. The last thing I wanted was to give away exactly where I was standing. Instead, I leaned against the car door, trying to track the sound with my ears. The tow truck dispatcher's voice from earlier echoed in my head. About an hour. I had no idea how much time had passed since that call, but it felt like forever. I kept glancing between the dark outline of the pickup and the swaying grass. Then, out of nowhere, the truck's engine cut off completely. Silence fell so heavy it almost rang in my ears. I swallowed hard, forcing myself not to imagine someone crouching out there just watching me. When the first faint shape broke through the grass line, my mind refused to make sense of it. It was a figure, moving low, almost like they were trying to stay below my line of sight. I could see the occasional glint of something metallic near their hand, catching the ambient light from my car's hazard flashers. My body tensed up. I reached back, popped my trunk just enough to grab the tire iron I kept in there, and closed it as quietly as I could. The person kept coming, slow but steady, until they were maybe 30 feet away. They stopped just at the edge of the shoulder, partly hidden in shadow. I could make out the shape of a cap pulled low and a jacket that hung too loosely on their frame. We just stood there in that standoff, neither moving, the only light between us blinking in that steady, useless hazard pattern. Somewhere far off, a coyote yipped, and the sound seemed to snap them out of it. They took a single step forward. My pulse thudded in my ears. I gripped the tire iron tighter and forced my voice out, low and firm, telling them to stop right there. They didn't answer. Instead, they angled their heads slightly as if gauging something, then glanced toward the truck parked down the road. That's when I realized there had to be more than one person. My gaze darted between the figure in the grass and that silent, hulking shape of the pickup, wondering if someone else was inside, waiting. I backed toward the driver's seat, still facing the stranger, and slid into the car without turning my back. I hit the door lock button, the clunk echoing louder than it should have in the quiet. The figure stayed where they were, unmoving now, but I could feel their attention locked on me. My hazard lights kept pulsing in that maddening rhythm, lighting them up for half a second at a time before swallowing them back into shadow. Then, out of nowhere, twin beams of light swept across the road from the opposite direction, another vehicle approaching. It was the tow truck. The stranger turned their head sharply toward it, then slipped back into the grass without a sound. By the time the tow truck pulled up behind me, there was no trace of movement, and the pickup that had been watching from down the road was gone. I told the driver what I'd seen, but he just gave me a skeptical look and said, "People sometimes get curious out here." Maybe that was true. But as we loaded my car onto the flatbed, I kept scanning the dark edges of the grass, half expecting that figure to reappear. They never did. Even now, I can't explain why they were creeping toward me or why that truck kept coming back. All I know is that if my car ever breaks down at night again, I won't be waiting alone.